The Ain't No Fang podcast. From Arizona Sports, Ain't No Fang.
Welcome to the midway point of the Arizona Diamondbacks season. This is the Ain't No Fang podcast on Arizona Sports. My name is Alex Weiner, and joining me today is a very familiar, much more familiar face on this show than I am. It's Steve Zinsmeister, broadcaster with the Diamondbacks pre- and post-game on the radio. Steve, how you doing, man? How you been?
Hey, Alex, it's good to see you, man. It's good to be back on this podcast, something that I'm a little bit familiar with.
I'm only here because you were here, so, I mean, I would hope so.
I don't think that's true at all. I think you're there in your own right, for sure. But no, I'm glad to be joining you, glad to be talking about a team that has made strides in recent weeks, and we'll see how they do here in this upcoming series.
Sure. I mean, now we are in the second half of the season. They enter the 81 game mark at a record of 39 and 42. Not entirely what everybody had in mind going into the season, especially last year when they were 48 and 33 at this point last year. But obviously, ton of context there. Lots of injuries, some underperformance. June has been much better, although it feels a little weird saying that right now, considering they just lost 2 games pretty, sizably to the Minnesota Twins. But they start off the second half with a series at the Oakland A's, and then it gets a little tricky with Dodgers, Padres, Braves, Blue Jays, and then the All-Star break. So as we are at the perfect halfway point, figured maybe about a week ago, thought about this idea of let's do some midseason awards, because it's sort of an interesting way to kind of get into what happened in the first half without doing here's your 5 storylines from the first half that, we're all going to remember. So figured it's a good way to ease into it, and for efficiency's perspective, let's go right to it. I think MVP is the easiest one to pick and the most natural place to start, but it also opens up another conversation about what exactly Ketel Marte has meant to this club over the first half of the year. So, Steve, I assume you would pick Ketel Marte for MVP, but maybe you have a zag.
No, I don't have a zag to your zig, but Ketel's the guy, and it's for multiple reasons. I think coming into this season, we all probably would have agreed that either he or Corbin Carroll is the most talented player on this team, but Ketel has risen to the occasion, and that's no knock on Corbin. I think that he's shown positive signs lately, but Ketel's just been consistent all the way through. He's a switch hitter. He plays a key athletic position at second base, and by the way, he plays it really well. He's gotten better defensively. He's third in Major League Baseball in defensive runs saved at any individual position. On the offensive side of things, he leads this team in hits, home runs, doubles, slugging percentage, OPS. He leads pretty much every category for them, and he's dominated lefties, something that he's always been good at, but this season has really just kind of elevated his game, and he's been spectacular. There's no way around it. He's basically carried this team in individual games. Even in games like yesterday where you get blown out, Ketel still has a really good game. 2 extra base hits for the 6th time this season. So, he's your MVP. There's no bones about it. And I asked Torey Lovello about it the other day. I said, don't you just feel like you have an NL MVP candidate on your team? And he said, yeah, and I'm not afraid to say it because the statistics back it up.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at wins above replacement, at least on Baseball Reference, he is second in the National League, only trailing Shohei Ohtani. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. And look, Ohtani, it's with the offensive numbers, it seems like he's the front runner for that award right now. But given everything Ketel has done defensively, which is a huge point that you make there. I mean, this is a breakout season for him on that side of the ball. He's been a good defender before, especially younger when he was healthier, but it feels like he's gone up a whole other level on that side. And, with him and Walker, there's a debate there as far as who's the most valuable defensive player on this team, which is another thing that we can go over later. It's like, who would you pick as the defensive player of the year? But back to Ketel, it's also kind of timely to talk about him now because he is a finalist to start at the All-Star game at second base for the National League. It's him and Luis Arraez. I think phase 2 of the voting starts on Sunday. And so, I mean, that'll be just, it's something that he has wanted. It's something he has gone for, and he has certainly, deserved that honor compared to every other second baseman in the National League. So, it'll be interesting to see what kind of votes he gets nationally, locally, what kind of support he'll get there. But that'll be something to definitely watch out for, because when you look at him as an MVP candidate, it's pretty obvious that this guy should be starting in the All-Star game as well. I guess another point as far as like team MVP is like, who could be the team MVP in the second half if it's not Ketel? Because it's hard to believe that it wouldn't be anybody but Ketel, given the way that he has consistently played. But like, is there anybody who you're seeing like, okay, they're getting hot right now, maybe they could potentially challenge for that if we had like a second half MVP, let's say?
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody that's like a clear-cut pick here, but Christian Walker is probably the biggest producer of runs in this lineup. I talked with him a couple weeks ago. It was right after a game where he had 2 home runs, and he basically flat out told me, every time I come to the plate, I know that my job is to change the score. And he recognizes his role in this lineup, especially after last year where really he was the only power hitter in the lineup. And this year, a little bit more of the same, but you add in guys like Jock Peterson and, others. And I think Christian knows that outside of just being an excellent defensive player, 2 straight Gold Gloves, probably going to win a 3rd this year. Outside of that, he's also a perennial 30 home run guy. He's got 30 plus in the last 2 seasons. He's certainly on pace for that again this year. He's on pace to hit over 90 RBI for the 2nd straight year. So I think Christian Walker's probably your biggest producer of runs over the course of the second half. And he's been remarkably healthy, knock on wood, for his entire career for the most part. And so he would stand out as probably the second option if it's not Ketel.
Yeah, he's at 17 homers and 51 RBIs halfway through the season. So on pace for that 3,000 mark again. I would add Corbin just because we've seen a pretty decent turnaround for him production-wise this month. The home runs have not come back yet, but he's hitting the ball hard. He's hitting hard line drives. He's getting on base. And so I guess speaking of like Walker and Marte, I think they're both going to win Gold Gloves based on how they have played this year, which for Walker, 3 Gold Gloves at first base is a tremendous honor. But for Marte, that would be huge too. Who would you pick for Defensive Player of the Year if you had to pick somebody? Because I know that's not an award in Major League Baseball. I know there's the Platinum Glove and all that kind of stuff. But just as far as like, who would win a Gold Glove in here, I feel like more interesting is like, okay, which defensive player do you think has had the biggest impact on them this season?
Yeah, I think it's great that we even can have this debate because, 3 months ago, we probably would have just said Christian Walker and just, wipe our hands clean of that conversation. But
no Alec Thomas. So, this kind of makes it easier. But now it's different.
Yeah, no Thomas. Perdomo missing a lot of time, kind of impacts that conversation. And Gabby Moreno certainly has not been bad defensively. He's been quite good, but, he's still an elite level catcher in this league. So I think for me, it's got to be Christian Walker just because of the track record, because he's won 2 Gold Gloves in a row. But if you're speaking specifically about this season and it's just in that kind of context, Ketel has taken huge strides defensively. He is nabbing every line drive that comes his way. He's making really effective throws. He's slowed down his process a little bit, so he's not speeding up too much in his throwing motion. I think he's been spectacular. He's even had a couple of really flashy plays this season. He's been really good at turning double plays with multiple different guys over at shortstop. And that's a difficult thing because you build this chemistry with a guy like Perdomo over time, and then all of a sudden he's not there for you. And now you're rolling up double plays with Kevin Newman, who is no schlub over at shortstop, but it's a new guy. It's a new face you have to get used to. And then Blaze Alexander works his way in there. So I think Ketel has taken huge steps forward defensively, and he deserves a lot of credit for that.
I think that's such a huge point with the double plays, right? Because there is such a built-in chemistry between middle infielders to be able to do that and do it so smoothly and efficiently. And everything he does this year has been really smooth. And sometimes even like just so mechanical, the way he kind of like sets his feet, stops, and then throws. And it's very deliberate and to make sure everything is perfectly on time. And just to do that with Blaze and Kevin and now Geraldo being back in there, it's just so cool to be able to watch somebody continue to be that smooth with different guys throwing him the ball in different ways at different angles. So I think that's a great point, and I would probably also pick Ketel, but I think that they're both right there as front runners for Gold Gloves. This one's harder. I feel like this one is harder because it kind of depends on your philosophy on how you do it. Because for the Cy Young of the Year, Pitcher of the Year for the first half, it becomes much less obvious than the MVP because if you were to pick, okay, which pitcher at doing their job consistently has been the best, I think there's little argument that it's not Ryan Thompson coming out of the bullpen. But if you're going to go for value, and obviously starters with the value compared to relievers, then it's like, okay, which starter? Is it Gallen? Is it Fott because he has the most innings? So where would you kind of land if you had to pick, like, which pitcher has been sort of the guy for them if you had to pick a pitcher of the year?
Yeah, we're 100% on the same page on this. If you're just going, doing your job, Ryan Thompson, since becoming an Arizona Diamondback, has arguably been one of the best relief pitchers in the game of baseball, not just in a Diamondbacks uniform. So I will throw that out there. I think that Gallen is still the MVP, so to speak, of the pitching staff. When you look at his numbers, 3.12 ERA, he's practically untouchable at home. He's your stopper when things aren't going well collectively. He's still fourth on this team in innings last time I checked, so it's not like he hasn't made a lot of starts. I think he's got 11 under his belt already this year. And so anytime you have I think it's a 4-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio is what he has currently. I think it's 60 strikeouts, 15 walks. Gallen is still the guy. But with that said, Brandon Pfaadt has kind of been the rock and the only solidified part of the starting rotation. Jordan Montgomery has sure had his ups and downs. Ryan Nelson has had his ups and downs. Slade Ciccone, same thing. Tommy Henry. So Brandon has really taken that next step. I think he'd be the first to tell you last season, the regular season did not go well for him. And he has changed a lot of things. There's a lot more movement on his pitches. He's not throwing as many straight fastballs and more sinkers to try to miss the barrel a little bit more. He's gotten a lot better at locating the sweeper and not leaving it over the plate. He's given up less home runs than he has, although that still seems to be a sticking point for him. But Pfaadt is going deeper into ball games too. And so in a lot of ways, his growth is probably the most significant overall. But Gallen is still the guy and still the best pitcher on this staff.
I would tend to agree that it's probably Gallen, although I want to have like a separate award for like the reliever of the year and just give Ryan Thompson that, because just as far as like going in there and doing exactly what it is the team needs you to do, Ryan Thompson has been as good as anybody in Major League Baseball at this point. And he's got a 1.5 wins above replacement on Baseball Reference. I mean, to do that halfway through a season as a reliever is pretty darn good. And because he's giving up tons and tons of ground balls, he's stranding lots of guys on base. He's got a 1.13 ERA this season and a whip below 1. So it's been spectacular what he's able to give them, especially given the injuries that they had in the bullpen at the beginning of the season with Paul Sewald, who has also been tremendous coming back. When you look at win probability added as a pitcher, which is a stat that kind of takes the winning probability when you enter the game versus when you exit the game, Sewald is actually on top even with the injury, but then it's Thompson right below him, and then it's Gallen right below him. So it's, those are the three who have been like the standouts there. I would say I would add Justin Martinez to that group as far as like who has like opened a lot of eyes with the starting or with the pitching staff. You're right with Pfaadt. It's interesting how they've managed him, right? Because they were so careful last year about when to take him out early. Can't face the third time through the order. And this year it has been a little bit different. He's going deeper into games, and the last couple of starts kind of went similarly. He was amazing through 5 innings or so, and then late in the game it's that one home run that kind of gets him and still plagues him a little bit, is being a little bit homer prone. It's kind of part of the deal with him. He doesn't walk a lot of guys. He's around the strike zone, and he'll give up, his fair share of homers. But he has been incredibly valuable. But I still think it's also Gallen. And to Gallen's point, it's kind of the worst kept secret, I think, is how Torrey put it, that he's coming back. It seems like it'll be Saturday. That hasn't been confirmed, but the expectation is that Saturday against the Oakland Athletics they'll get him back. So to have him at the start of the second half of the season and what you'd hope for to be the rest of the season is such a huge boost to a rotation that, as you mentioned, has so many guys who have been up and down.
Yeah, and if I can make one more point on Brandon Pfaadt, I had a conversation with him a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week and a half ago, because he had a couple of different outings where he had no strikeouts or close to no strikeouts. I think he's got 2 of them now with none. And the conversation was around how to get guys out without having your best stuff. Because I think it's pretty easy to get through an inning or an outing when you are striking out guys left and right. When you strike out 8, you're likely going to have a good day. But when you aren't getting a lot of swing and miss, it's even more pivotal that you're able to get those players out in some other way. And that's probably the biggest area that I've seen Brandon Pfaadt improve in, is that he's able to get guys on ground balls or pop flies the way that he might not have last season when he was constantly going for the strikeout. But he's still a strikeout guy. He's still one of the best at making swings and misses for the Diamondbacks. But there's just been a couple weird outings where he hasn't had a single one.
He has 2 in his last 2 starts, which have both been 6 in the third innings. So yeah, it's a little bit different, but it feels like game planning wise and how he's attacking hitters too, going more sinker heavy, trying to get that early swing and try to get some weak contact. It's mostly worked out. I mean, he has kept them in games pretty much all season long, even if the final stat line isn't as pretty as maybe the way the game was going, similar to how it was against the Twins this past week. So, I think there is an argument for him just because from a volume perspective and a stability perspective, he has given them a lot. But as far as just being, the best starter in the rotation, it's Gallen. And so I think we're in consensus there that we'll give like our, mid-season Cy Young to Gallen, but there's some pretty good honorable mentions there as well. To mention again, to kind of like put a bow on like the pitching side of it. They haven't seen Merrill Kelly since April. They haven't seen Eduardo Rodriguez at all. So, I mean, with Gallen coming back, there's still going to be a little bit of fluctuation in the rotation because they're going to have to rely on a lot of these younger guys to continue to piece these starts together, whether that's Ryan Nelson or Slade Ciccone. But the way that, Gallen was throwing before he got hurt, and the way that Pfaadt has been able to keep them into games, the hope is that Montgomery continues to improve, although that last start was pretty ugly, that there could be a little bit more stability there, but there's still going to be a fair share of volatility, I would imagine. So that's just something that they're going to have to play with and find a way to overcome. Sticking to pitchers, because I think we're both going to pick a pitcher here. Rookie of the Year. There's really only 2 options because they haven't had a lot of rookies play, and part of that is injuries to prospects, most notably Jordan Lawler, who's been held to 4 games, which have been spectacular, but he's back on the IL with a hamstring issue. Really, it's Justin Martinez or Blaze Alexander, and for me, that's a pretty clear pick. Who would you pick as the Rookie of the Year halfway through the Diamondbacks season?
Yeah, I'd love to give a ton of credit to Blaze. I think Blaze has a really advanced approach at the plate for a rookie. If you look at his pull rate, it's actually pretty low for a guy who hits a lot of home runs in the minor leagues. So I want to give him credit. But yeah, it's Justin Martinez. He went 15 straight appearances without giving up a run. His ERA is in the low ones right now. And honestly, it was like 0.34 for like a month. So I think he deserves all the credit. Torrey wants to get him into more high leverage situations. We've talked about that over the course of the last few weeks. I mean, obviously they have a lot of good options in the back end with Paul Sewald's been spectacular. They still like Kevin Ginkel quite a bit, despite his early season struggles, and Ryan Thompson, obviously. So it's a good thing that Justin Martinez isn't being used in some of those high leverage situations, because that means they have other guys that can do the job. But there's no doubt that the organization sees Justin Martinez as a back end option in the future, and that's great. I think earlier, I think it was a couple weeks ago, I asked Ryan Thompson about Justin Martinez, and he said it's about time we start talking about him as if he's Mason Miller, obviously the great relief pitcher and closer now for the Oakland A's, who we might see here in the next couple of days. But I think he's got a good point. Martinez has just as good a stuff as Miller does in terms of velocity. He's got great movement. The splitter is nasty. The slider, basically nobody is hitting the slider this season. I think Martinez, as long as he stays in the strike zone, he's one of the best relievers on this team.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point, I mean, he's done a really nice job of keeping the walks down. I mean, when he first got up to the major leagues last year, it was only 10 innings of work, but it was 9.9 walks per 9 innings, and it's down to 5. That's a huge stride, and that's a huge reason why he's been able to kind of keep himself out of trouble, because he has the stuff to get anybody out, to get whatever strikeout that he needs to get. It's just making sure that you're not putting yourself into harm's way, and I think it's come along a lot quicker than many have expected it to, given where he looked like at the end of last season compared to where he's at now. And, in spring training, he's throwing bullpens to like the physical strike zone with like the strings and stuff like that to make sure that he's in the zone. And he's done a really nice job of keeping that pretty consistent this year. You're right. He has a 1.24 ERA, and his 15 game scoreless streak ended in like garbage time against the White Sox, if I remember correctly, where it was like one of those kind of low leverage situations. They just needed him to eat a couple of innings. So when he's been given the opportunities to kind of step up in high leverage situations, maybe minus that Phillies game that got a little bit away from him, he has mostly stepped up. But yeah, it's a great point and it's a good kind of way to kind of frame the bullpen a little bit, because I think the bullpen's in a really good spot. It may not be as deep, and you may look at the deadline if they're in contention at maybe adding another lefty or somebody like that. But as far as like that Martinez, Manaply, Thompson, Ginkel, Sewald, it's a pretty healthy 5 guys to have back there as options when they're ahead or tied in these ball games, and Martinez is absolutely part of that mix. Blaze has had a lot of impressive moments this year. He's had a lot of rookie moments this year. The talent is there. He's been very, very useful for them, and so we'll see what that role looks like as the season continues to evolve. We'll see what happens with the whole third base situation. But if you would have asked me after the first 3 weeks of the season, then it was like, oh, Blaze is going to get this. But Martinez has really stepped up, and so maybe in the second half, if Blaze gets some more regular at bats, he finds his way back into that conversation too. Kind of along the same lines, but a little bit different on the veteran side of it. Newcomer of the year, and I think you have a couple of options here, but is it Jock Peterson for you too? Because that seems like the obvious one for me.
Yeah, I'm going to go Jock Peterson here. I hate to agree with you on every single point, but
it's like we watch the team every day.
In fairness, yeah. You could argue that Jock has been the best hitter on this team, albeit in a smaller sample size. They've kind of unlocked him offensively in some ways because he mostly plays against right-handed pitching. In fact, he barely hits against lefties. So that's really been able to maximize his value offensively. He's leading the team in OPS. I think that Jock has been spectacular for the role that they've asked him to play in. And I think a little bit of credit there too to Randall Grichuk, who's also done his job, more than his job actually, because earlier in the season he told me he was exclusively preparing to face left-handed pitching, which was his job. And by doing so well against them, he's kind of earned himself a little bit of playing time against righties recently. So I think both of those guys are in that conversation. But my number 2, if I had to pick anybody behind Jock, would be Kevin Newman, who, they really didn't make a big investment in the offseason. He comes in with maybe a chance to make the team, doesn't make the team out of spring training, but then due to an injury to Geraldo Perdomo, he gets called up and basically becomes the starting shortstop and really held down the fort. And he's been a really good source of energy at the bottom of the lineup, able to turn the lineup card over to the top guys and really produce some runs there at the bottom. And defensively, he's been really, really solid. Now they're trying him at third base a little bit. So I think Newman has huge value for what they invested in him in the offseason. But yeah, I'm going to still stick with Jock Peterson, as I think that he's probably one of the 3 best hitters in this lineup right now.
Yeah, and you just look at the value that the DH position has brought to them. And this point has been made before, but last year they were 21st in wins above replacement from the designated hitter spot in the lineup, well below average, and now well below league average, I should say, and now they're 4th. I mean, that's such a huge jump and such a huge piece to have in the middle of the lineup that has helped them win games when some of the other bats in the lineup, like Corbin Carroll or Eugenio Suarez or Lourdes Gurriel Jr. have had their stretches where there hasn't been a ton of production. And so Jock has been a huge deal with that. You're right, Grichuk has had a really good year in the role that they've been given to him. And now that Alek Thomas gets back, and we'll see how they kind of maneuver the outfield and what that does for different players playing time. But it seems pretty clear that platoon is here to be a staple for the rest of the season. Back to your platoon thing on Jock. He has 13 plate appearances this all season against left-handed pitching. I mean, it has been very, very specified what role he has played in, and has worked really, really well for what this team needed out of that kind of thumper, middle of the order bat. And so, and I think as a clubhouse guy, as a veteran guy, that's also something that they wanted, and he has been able to give them. So, yeah, I think that's clear. I think it's good to give Newman a shout out there just for being a stable force to kind of raise the floor of this team, but it was getting Jock Peterson in the building was a slam dunk at a point. I felt like it was a little bit under the radar nationally when the move happened, and it's proved to be one of the most impactful, or at least one of the most effective offseason moves any team made in free agency for sure. I'm going to give you one last award here, and this is not like a player, like to highlight a player. Which win this season stands out to you more than any other? What was the most memorable victory for the Diamondbacks in the first half of the year, in your opinion?
The most memorable victory for me, and I don't know what value this carries for everyone else, but there was a game, I don't remember even, I think it was in April, when the Diamondbacks were losing to the Cubs, and it's the bottom of the ninth inning. Jace Peterson was still on the team. I remember him hitting in the bottom of the ninth, and I think he grounded out or something. And Ketel Marte comes to the plate in the bottom of the ninth with 2 outs, and they're down by 1 run. And I don't think there was a lot of energy at Chase Field for that moment. I think that there wasn't a lot of belief that they could win the game. And he hits a home run with 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth. Literally the one environment that we all envisioned ourselves in when we were in Little League is that moment. And he hits a home run, ties the game. They go to extras, and the D-backs win that game. Now, if I'm remembering correctly, the Diamondbacks this season, I think, are like 1-37 or 1-38 or something like that in games where they trailed by multiple runs. I believe that's the one game that they won when they were trailing by multiple runs. And so it was really cool for me because I was down on the field level waiting to see what happened, if I was going to grab a player to interview after the game, and to watch Ketel live up to kind of the superstardom that he's built up, to see that in the moment and watch that ball launch out of the ballpark. That was the coolest thing for me. And that was probably the most energetic I've seen Chase Field this season too.
Yeah, that's a good one. And Jack Summers always keeps track of it. It's 1-37 right now when they trail by 2+ runs at any point, which is remarkable given where they were last year. And that's a note to have in the back pocket, is when you're kind of breaking down what has happened in the first half of the season for the Diamondbacks. Is that is a huge storyline, is that there haven't been quite as many comebacks. But that was the one. That was certainly a memorable night at Chase Field. I'm going to go with the Bees game because it has to be, or because I have to. I mean, it was just like something that you'll never see at a baseball game again. At least you'd hope you never see it at a baseball game ever again. But not only the fact that there was a bee delay and we got like the I need a hero song or blasting over the loudspeaker as the fans go nuts and the beekeeper is like pumping up the crowd, but the fact that they come back and they win that game against the Dodgers at home on a walk-off home run by Christian Walker, his second home run of that game. That's a game that like I'm just never going to forget forever. And if I had to pick a second one, that's not the one that you said, I would probably go with opening day, because 14 runs in a single inning is one of the most insane things I've experienced at a baseball stadium ever. I mean, it just felt like it was never ever going to end. They were just going to be like 5 hours of just single. So those would be my two. Can
I pick another one?
You can pick another. You could pick as many as you want.
So the other one that comes to mind was a few weeks ago when Pavin Smith hit a 2-run walk-off home run, and he launched that ball over the center field wall, which is no easy feat at Chase Field. And just how excited his teammates were for him. You know, he's a bench player. He's not even currently in the major leagues, but I don't think that's an indictment on him. Torey continues to tell us, the thing he loves most about Pavin is he just thinks he's a great hitter. And in that moment, he was a great pinch hitter. He wins the game for his teammates. I may or may not have gotten some Gatorade dumped all over me during a post-game interview, so I owe that one to Pavin as well. But that was another one that stands out. And then on the B game, I was going to say, first of all, the nest of bees was about 100 feet directly in front of me. So I didn't appreciate that from the bees. It felt a little personal. But also, too, like the outside effects of that B game. Because remember, Jordan Montgomery was supposed to start that game. Right. He ends up getting scratched at about the 35-minute mark when, half an hour in, they were like, all right, we're not starting this guy. Brandon Hughes, I think, started that game. And then that also set back Zach Gallen a week because he was dealing with some hamstring stuff on the side, and they decided to push Gallen almost a week, I think it was. And then so there were a lot of weird things that came out of that B game. I just had a bug guy over the other day, and he was telling me all about the bee. He works with the bee guy. Of course he does.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, so he's like, oh, you're the Diamondback guy. Yeah, I know the bee guy. I mean, he's probably the most popular man at Chase Field this season, and it's a beekeeper.
Matt Hilton, right? That's his name, Matt.
Yeah, Matt. Definitely. He was a really nice guy, but what I loved about Matt is he totally was he's not the biggest sports fan, but boy did he live up to the moment.
I mean, he got his own baseball card. I mean, kudos to that. And that's pretty incredible. And even his story about having to leave his kid's little league game, jump in the car, get all the way down from Surprise to downtown Phoenix to save the Diamondbacks Dodgers game. I mean, that was an unbelievable night, even if we had to wait there for a little while before we could actually watch the baseball. And, maybe the lingering effects of that game weren't great, but what an unbelievable win. And, they'll get another crack at the Dodgers here in a few days when they go to LA next week. For that, they get 3 games against the Oakland Athletics starting Friday night, and then with Saturday, maybe Gallen is back Sunday, and then the day off and they go to Los Angeles. But Steve, thanks so much for kind of breaking down some of the most memorable moments, performances, players of the first half of the season. Really appreciate the time. Hey, no problem, Alex. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it, and I'll see you at the ballpark, all right? The hashtag return. Yeah, thanks so much. So, that's it for Ain't No Fang this week. Diamondbacks versus the Athletics starts tonight. It'll be on 98.7 in the Arizona Sports app, so keep it locked into Arizona Sports for all things Diamondbacks baseball as we enter the second half.